All right. Welcome in, everybody.
All right.
There we go. Okay. Getting everything set up over here. Good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. Let me know where you are all coming from as you're coming in. I'd love to know what part of the world you're from, and we'll see if I can read some off. Hello, Vicky from New Zealand. Michelle from North Carolina. I hope that you are dry and safe. From Missouri, Stacy, Adam. Oh, hello, Adam from Australia, Jude. Hey, Jude. It's 6 a.m. in Cali. Yeah, right on. Bright and early. Sierra from California. El Sosa from SoCal. Alberta, Canada. From Super Scary Sarah. Stephanie from Greenville, South Carolina. Shauna near Boston. Kitty from Minnesota. Hey. Iris from Albuquerque. Rita from Germany. Oh, wow. Raimundo from Portugal. Hey, Raimundo. Luis from London Town. Royce from Baltimore. Gray from Nashville. Kimberly from Austin. Mama Bear from Wilmington, North Carolina. Holly from Mexico. Gret from Japan. Sophia from Portugal. Wow, this is amazing. So many people coming in from so many different places. Hello from Poland, Montana, Croatia. I love it. This is awesome. Nina from Norway. Amazing. Very cool. Sid from Minnesota. Gail from Michigan. Oh my God. This is great. Well, happy Friday, everybody. I'm going to get started here in just a minute. I am trying to let a few more minutes tick by so that we get more people in here. Usually after the live stream starts, you get more people slowly streaming in. So if I look a little tired, it is because my daughter has been getting over COVID this week. And so there's been a lot of late nights with the fever and the cough. And thankfully, she is out of the woods and feeling better. And so, but we also have just had a bunch of, the Mars and Cancer transit for me personally has just been like, whoa. There's been a number of really intense health events in my extended family. And, just really unforeseen. It's funny because, you have a sense of what to expect, but you never really know exactly what to expect from certain transits. And I had a pretty good feeling that Mars in Cancer, given that I have Mercury and the Sun in Cancer in the third house, might impact some of my family members. And boy, did it. And everyone's okay, thankfully, so far. But looking at some challenging developments with some people's health in my family. And thank you for asking. JC asks, when is your dad's surgery? It's coming up. He has his surgery on election day. Isn't that crazy? But yeah, there's some risk involved because he's had blood clots before in his life. He's having knee replacement surgery. Thanks for asking. Yeah, it's just, I hope that all of you have been doing well. I'd love to, any general summarizations of how you've been doing with Mars and Cancer, especially, but eclipse season and so much water. Oh my gosh. And for some people, so literal, the flooding and the hurricanes. Yeah, but the water energy has been dramatic, to say the least. So anyway, there's a few things. Now that we have a couple hundred people in here, I'm going to get started. So officially, welcome in, everybody. This is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. It's Friday. Happy Friday. And I'm doing a live stream this morning. I wanted to do a live stream to say thank you to so many people who helped us reach our goal of 70,000 subscribers on the channel over the past few months. You guys helped us double our average monthly subscriber total. And that number is holding steady as we're kind of focused now on trying to set incremental goals for growth on the channel. I think it helps to just come on and tell everybody, hey, if you want to see Nightlight grow and the cool things it does, and you want to support our community and our vision, and our business, then just subscribe if you're watching the channel and haven't yet. And we did some research that found that there's a huge amount of people that watch the channel that are not subscribed, and that simple click of subscribe is a big deal for us. So yeah, just a way of saying thank you to everybody for helping our channel grow. We really appreciate you. I think we have an amazing community around this channel, especially through the school. There's so many people who come from the channel to our programs and come and study with us. And our school community and the YouTube community are filled with people who I think have a lot of very sincere and authentic desires for spiritual growth behind why they consume astrology. And people who know me for a long time, or followed me for a long time, know that sadhana is a daily part of my life. Sadhana is a yogic term really for practice. And practice has been a part of my life for many, many years as a content creator. I talk about this every year during my Kickstarter, but it's something that some new people to my channel may not know about yet. Certainly I say more about it during the Kickstarter time of year, but every day before I create content, unless I'm doing a live stream like this one, I generally have practices that are really important for me when it comes to centering myself and preparing what is hopefully the most original, interesting, authentic, and rich content that I can. And the purpose of those sadhanas, those spiritual practices, are to make sure that the content has something of spiritual value. I don't consider myself a guru. I don't consider myself anyone with any special kind of knowledge or insight. I just like to share what I'm learning about, what's working for me, the insights that have been special or important for me as an ongoing student of astrology myself. And I really think that's what the role of a teacher is just to be a facilitator for other people's learning. And teachers are good at mining their own learning process for things that are interesting. And maybe a teacher has an interesting way of repackaging things that they've learned about that other people can easily understand. So the channel, I really pride myself on trying to make content that's interesting, and that maybe we're covering a transit you know about because you've heard about this transit 20 times before, but now you're hearing about it in a way that you've never heard about it before. My list of 5 things, I try to make sure those lists are different every time. So a lot of that comes down to daily practice and daily sadhana. It's interesting, for the past maybe 3 years, 2 years of my life, my sadhana has been considerably, I mean, there's always an intellectual component where I'm studying things, learning things, reading things. There's always components of my life that involve just quiet time, contemplative time. But the practices that have been more a part of my life in this season have been working out physically, lifting and cardio and diet and sleep, and then playing my guitar. So it's amazing how sitting down and playing an instrument and moving my body have been much more like somatically kind of like embodied versions of sadhana for me. Whereas for many, many years previous, it was really meditation. It was japa. It was, mantra. It was asana. It was a little bit more like traditionally monastic looking. I feel like I'm always kind of a monk, but the practices have changed. All of that is just to say a little bit more about myself as a content creator, if you're newer to the channel. And also, I think that people who are in a regular practice of introspection, who are regularly looking for ways to grow, and who are regularly reflecting on the nature of their experiences, and have some kind of spiritual set of values, maybe it's spiritual but not religious, for example, they find a home here on this channel. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, and that it's my work to keep making sure that this is a place of integrity and value, that I will keep working on myself and keep working on my practices and try to keep creating the best content for all of you, so that you find this to be one of many shelters out there for your mind and your heart. You're in a good place that will offer you some good things to think about or work with, even if you come to different conclusions, that that there's consistently the quality is such that you've got something good to work with. You've got something good to chew on. So anyway, thank you for helping us reach 70,000 subscribers. I am going to say one more thing, and then I am going to open it up for Q&A. And Q&A is just like it sounds. What are your questions? And I will do my best to provide you with some thoughts. The only questions that I will not allow will be questions asking me to interpret something in your birth chart. It's impossible for me to do that without context and without sitting down and really spending time with the totality of a chart. So if you have questions about astrological placements like planets and signs or something more general, that's fine, but just nothing specifically about your birth chart. I won't be answering those questions. But otherwise, you can think about what questions you want to ask. What I'm going to do now is just briefly, as I do every day at the start of my videos, I usually have a promo or two from the school. So we had our talk, The Myth of Astrological Compatibility last night. It was pretty wild, actually. The power went out in my house, and it went out right as I was talking. And so I had to get on my phone, and then my wife came and lit some candles for me. So I ended up looking like "Are You Afraid of the Dark" on Nickelodeon, just like candlelit. Like it was like Adam's hosting a séance. so so it was pretty wild looking. But if you were there, that was our monthly webinar. I want to take you over and show you the monthly webinars that are coming up in the next couple of months. So if you go over to nightlightastrology.com, and I am going to put this right here. Nightlightastrology.com. Go to the live talks under events tab. Once you go there, you're going to see 3 new talks coming up in November, December, and January. Next month, I'm doing a talk on Pluto in Aquarius that I've called Pluto in Aquarius, AI, Aliens, and New World Orders. And I'm going to be looking at Pluto in Aquarius in webinar format over the course of like a good 90 minutes. It's going to be a really in-depth look at Pluto in Aquarius, and also looking at the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius in world history. So in December, I'm doing a talk called The Sixth House, Slavery, Sickness, Sacrifice, and Service. And we're going to be talking about the traditional understanding of this house and how we can work with it, because it is a difficult house, but there's lots of good stuff that we also tend to overlook in this house when we're learning about it from the ancient perspective. It just kind of sounds like a bleak house. So I like to try to give people more to work with when it comes to the difficult houses. So check that out in December. And then in January, I'm doing a talk called Saturn conjunct Neptune in Aries, Encounters at the Edges of Reality. You can check that out. That's going to be taking a look at the big Saturn-Neptune conjunction that is coming up next year. So go to courses next and click on the first year course. Today is the very last day of our early bird registration sale for the upcoming program that begins on November 16th. So if you scroll down to the bottom if you scroll down through this page, you're going to find what the program is all about. And for the past couple of weeks, at the end of every video on my channel, I've been leaving a informational video about the program. So there's been plenty of opportunities to learn more about it. I'm only going to say a few quick things. The class is all via live webinar, 30 classes on the year. And then we also have 12 guest teachers outside of those 30 classes that you have included in your program, like visiting lectures on different topics that are just kind of fun. And then we also have, in between major units of study, we have breakout study sessions led by our tutoring staff. Every course has a course director and a lead tutor. And they are there in an interactive group forum discussion you can utilize throughout the entire year. And they'll typically get to your questions within a day, a business day anyway. And then in between major units of study, we have these study sessions you can attend for extra help in tutoring. We also have a ton of bonus material, optional quizzes, and all of that good stuff. Lots of bonus lectures. So it's a really comprehensive program. You can also move at your own pace. If you cannot attend live, you can watch the recordings on your own pace. And you have 1 year from the end of the program to take the final exam as well. So you can really take this in 2 full years if you wanted to. You have that much time before you need to pass the final exam. You don't even have to take the final exam. A lot of people take the course for a personal hobby, and the final exam is therefore not necessarily appropriate for that kind of person. A lot of people who want to go professional, of course, the exam is a good way to build your credentials. Anyway, you'll find the options for registration at the bottom, and those early bird payments for the install plan or the early bird payment itself are only good until today. So today is your last day. Tomorrow morning, the regular prices will return. However, one thing that's there for everybody all the way up until the start of class is need-based tuition. So if you are someone who would like to take the program, but for whatever reason you're on a really tight budget, we understand that people are coming from different places and have different limitations and constraints. And so we want to make sure that, if you need some help, you can use this. And this makes, for us, for 14 years now, I have been consistently offering training programs in astrology at sliding scales for all students, because I believe very deeply that spiritual topics like this should be accessible. And so that's a big part of our vision at Nightlight. We're a business, just like any other business. We're looking to earn a living and make money, but we want to make sure with astrology that we don't do so at the cost of making some people not be able to afford or study something that's sacred and really should be accessible for everyone. So that's there for you all the way up until the start of the program. You can fill that out and pick within a sliding scale what rate of tuition works for you. Okay, now I have finished everything that I wanted to say. A big thank you to everybody for helping us get to 70,000 subscribers, and some promos for our upcoming classes. What I'd love to do next, and I'm really super excited for this, is to open it up for all of your questions. I have probably until a little after 9 o'clock to just sit here and take whatever questions you have for me. So please put your question in the Q&A box. Remember that I am not taking any questions about your personal charts. Like, please interpret this in my chart. But questions that are more general about astrology are welcome. And thanks, Christopher. Glad that you're enjoying the program. Aha, okay. Let's see here. Aha, okay, I'm going to scroll down, and this is a good one. What are the main themes of transiting Pluto conjoining a natal Mercury? Yeah, so anytime that transiting Pluto is hitting a square, opposition, or conjunction to natal Mercury, in particular those hard aspects, first and foremost, Pluto is going to offer a very significant period of activation for all the topics ruled by Mercury in the chart. So we tend to think that planet-to-planet contacts are all about the planets, and they are. However, one thing you have to remember is that there's going to be a whole sign house of Virgo and a whole sign house of Mercury, and those houses in your birth chart are hosted by Mercury. So you look at the topics of those houses as potentially being activated by any transit to your natal Mercury. And this is where Hellenistic astrology really gives us such a full toolkit to work with. In addition to that, you will also want to think about the topics that are natural to Mercury. So, for example, that would be anything related to the intellect or the mind or learning, speech and communication, writing, philosophy. Mercury is a bit of a magician too. So things like technology and inventiveness, major shifts or changes with respect to the way that you think and the way that you perceive and the way that you communicate. People will often report having major transitions, transformations, death and rebirth scenarios, and very intense changes with respect to how they think and what is going on with their mind. I remember when Pluto opposed my natal Mercury, I published a book, and I went through the process of editing and learning about, a major publishing house in, Penguin in New York City, and the power dynamics and the advertising and the publicity and the changes that they wanted me to make to my book for the sake of selling more copies, and all of the underlying power dynamics of a publishing house and the process of publishing, and the process of writing and then putting a book out into the world. Pluto was opposing my natal Mercury. Fascinating, right? So you can have a lot of different things that come up, but those are some of the ones that come to my mind. All right. Shout out to Ashley, Skyhouse, and Herbalism. I plan to work with nettles as Mars goes into Leo. My natal placement and found her medicine story, Nettles podcast. Yes. Yeah, totally. That's my lovely wife. Definitely check out her channel, Skyhouse Herbs. She is a fantastic herbalist and a really good podcaster and storyteller as well. I think you'll really enjoy her work if you like herbs. Let's see. What is the MC in the chart and how important is it? That's a great question, Angela. The MC is the medium coulee or the midheaven, and it is the meridian line that runs from south to north. And that meridian line is going to, in a sense, cut the sun's journey from rising to setting in half in terms of when the sun crosses that point, it will be at its highest latitude for the day. Now, all planets, when they cross that point during their 24-hour day, depending on their relative latitude in relation to the ecliptic and the sun, will also be at their high point for the day when they cross that line. So that line represents a dynamical point of energy, you could say, or strength or potency or loudness for a planet. It's visible, and when a planet reaches that point, it is elevated, and it's in that kind of visible central part of the sky, lifted up on high. So in quadrant-based houses, of course, the midheaven is used to denote the actual cusp of the 10th house. But in ancient astrology, the midheaven is a dynamical point that floats freely in the 11th, 10th, or 9th whole sign houses, and is not identical to the topical 10th house, which is the 90-degree high point of the zodiacal circle relative to the rising portion of the circle. So they have similar meanings in terms of the high point along a circle, the high point along an arc. But the 10th whole sign house is about the sign and therefore temple of the zodiac that is at the high point relative to the zodiac's rising portion. Whereas the midheaven is a little bit more of an astronomical feature that tells us when planets are at their high point. And so for that reason, the midheaven is usually thought of first and foremost as a dynamical point for planets, which means that if you have a planet configured to it by aspect or conjoined to it by degree, that it tends to amplify the power, loudness, brightness, visibility of the planet in the life. Often that will have some overlap with the 10th house topics like career or vocation or fame, but it's not exactly the same. And you typically don't start delineating the career by delineating the midheaven unless you have planets configured to it. So the midheaven can help you delineate something like career or public reputation, but typically only if planets are conjoined to it or configured to it, especially the ruler. That is how I work with it in my practice in the way that my teacher taught me. And so, yeah, that's the basic difference between the two of them. The midheaven is a dynamical point that tends to amplify the power, strength, visibility, vocality of a planet in a chart, in a life. Whereas the 10th whole sign house is going to be the temple of the zodiac used to denote the 10th house topics. So in modern astrology and quadrant-based house systems, there's some conflation between the midheaven and the 10th house. Ancient astrologers were utilizing the 10th whole sign house in the midheaven in slightly different ways, although they were related. So I hope that helps. It's a good question. What does it mean to not have any planets in a house? Good question. It doesn't really mean anything because there will always still be a ruler of the house. So a basic way of thinking about how we delineate topics in astrology in the whole sign house Hellenistic view of things is by means of starting with a topical consideration or concern. So for example, someone comes in and they say, I want to talk about money. I want to know, when I might be earning more money or when my fortune or fate might change with respect to money because it's been pretty bad up until this point. Kind of typical things that come to people's, that people come to astrologers with, So The second house would be a topical starting place for money. It's not the only place we could look for money, but it's one of them, one of the main ones. So we would start by looking at the house, the second house. Okay, well, let's say that Gemini is your second house, whole sign. There's no planets there. It does not mean that there is no money that exists in your life, right? Instead, the way that we approach the delineation is to look at the ruler. So, where is Mercury? Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. What house is Mercury in? The placement of Mercury in the chart as the ruler of the second house, in other words, will give us insight into the topic of money. And it will, in that case, if it's not, Mercury is not in the second house and it's somewhere else, it will also create a kind of synthesis between the topic of money and another set of topics in the house, because Mercury, the ruler of money, will be in some other house. And if you are utilized, say we use Cancer in the second house, then we have two rulers that we can potentially look at to delineate money, because there's an exaltation ruler as well as a domicile ruler. And so you can actually look at both. You could look at Jupiter or you could look at the moon as a way of helping you understand money potentially in the person's life. Now, if you have planets in the house, what this is doing is it's adding more layers of interpretive significance to the picture. So, let's say you have Cancer in the second house, and you have, let's say you have Mars and Venus there. Mars and Venus are both in Cancer in your second house. So those planets will contribute in their natures, their significations, to the topic of money, but then so will the moon and potentially Jupiter as the hosts, who will then modify the expressions of Mars and Venus in that house. The synthesis that we are learning to do as astrologers with all of that information is learning how to do astrology. The nuts and bolts of astrology have to do with houses, signs, planets, aspects, and dignities, which relate planets to signs and planets to houses, dignities do, and aspects, which connect planets to planets. Once we understand that language, all of astrology is just a matter of mixing and matching multiple layers of information. And understanding what different archetypal combinations tend to produce, the most common things that they tend to produce in terms of lived experiences, psychological themes, different scenarios, and then being able to artfully apply those combinations and possibilities given the specific context of the question or concern that someone comes to a reading with. And then, of course, we apply timing techniques to also time out when certain kinds of patterns or themes may present or be active. So anyway, that's a little crash course there in planets and houses. I hope that's helpful. Letty, sun and rising here. I have no questions. I wanted to say thank you for your thoughts and profound words every morning. Hey, thank you, Letty. That's really nice of you. Really appreciate you. Thank you. Let's see here. I was wondering if you ever work with the vertex in your practice or in your school. I do not personally know, but that is not to say that it's not valid or interesting. It's just not one that I work with. Does mutual reception have to be the same kind of reception? No. So let's say that you have Jupiter. Let me give what's a good example of this? No, you can have it. It can be mixed. You could have a planet in the exaltation of one planet and the other in the domicile. So to me, mutual reception, the way that I work with mutual reception will always be, as long as they're in each other's signs by domicile or exaltation. I'm sorry, I can't think of an example off the top of my head. I'm a little fuzzy this morning. This is an interesting question. Katerina asks, how often intense to use astrology, as in communicate, get in touch? Sometimes it gets too intense. I feel it gets watered down. How was that for you when you started with astrology? Let me give you a simple example. I like to draw analogies to the tarot often because people just get it right away. The mistake we make, and this is like one of my soapboxes, you can feel free to disagree. We can still be friends. But I believe that astrology is a form of astral omen divination that exists within a what I would call an animistic or sort of pantheistic view of reality. That's where I'm coming from with astrology. That's what I believe it is. In other words, I think it's acausal. I don't think it's an empirical, mechanistic, objective science. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's more like music in that it's sensible and intelligent, and there are all sorts of interesting like mathematical ratios exist in music. There's a logos in our language for sure, but I believe that the use of astrology is artful, intuitive. There's an almost mediumistic and divinatory quality to how it actually works in practice that makes it resistant to just standard objective empirical testing or something like that, right? So when you understand it that way, what you also usually start to understand is that whenever you approach astrology, you are entering into a communication with spirit. Like when you listen to the channels that you listen to, the reason that you listen to them is probably because it helps you facilitate that conversation with spirit. The animate living world around you starts speaking to you. Your experiences are not just objective phenomenon. They are living, vibrant experiences that have spirits living in them and that are speaking to you. Experiences like a bird in nature that speaks to you as an omen are not just a bird, they're not just an experience, they're a form of communication with a living, sentient cosmos, right? So once you understand astrology in that way, you start developing an incredible mindfulness around how and why you're approaching astrology, whether you're listening to content or you're reading a book or you're looking at charts. You start recognizing that you have to be careful. You have to kind of take your sandals off and walk with care around what you're doing. Now, here's my analogy with tarot. Here's a deck of tarot cards. You know, nobody that I know who practices tarot, most of the time, people, this is my little bag. I got this bag a long time ago, like 14 years ago, I think. Anyway, this bag, I put my cards in when I'm not using them. Why? Because they're powerful. Because they're powerful. There's some mojo there. And keeping them in that bag, in addition to just like taking care of the cards, obviously, is a ritualistic way of saying, I am not using you right now. And when I do, I know that I have to use you with care and ritual and concern and intentionality because I'm communicating with something. Once those cards are out and there's any, you know, I mean, there's something, I've taken them out and just kind of casually looked at them while studying. Sure. Okay. That's fine. But even then, I take them out of my bag. I'm thoughtful, you know, and I'm careful. I don't just chuck them around. Everybody gets that with tarot. Nobody has a problem understanding that with tarot. People have a real hard time understanding that with astrology because they think it's just a mechanistic information machine that they can approach and it'll just spit stuff out, you know, just give me what I want to know stuff. You know, and that's problematic because it's like it's a living oracle. It looks like an objective machine moving in patterns in the sky, but it's actually like a magical squid with tentacles that's talking to us. So how often or intense to use astrology is really about cultivating a relationship. That relationship, the more you treat it like a relationship, the more you develop a felt sense for who you're talking to. And there's so many ways to talk to the oracle. And, you know, listening to content is part of how we talk to the oracle. Creating content is part of how I talk with the oracle. But if it's getting too intense, step away. It's probably getting too intense, not because of the oracle, but because of ourselves, but because we're approaching it from a space of anxiety or obsessiveness, or we're worrying about it too much, or we're trying to figure out every last thing or have control when we need to surrender or whatever. So tend to it with the same care that you would a deck of cards, and you'll be in a much better place. That's my advice anyway for now. Okay, good question. That was really fun. Okay, let's see. Do you ever use anything other than whole sign houses and why? Yeah, I use Regiomontanus houses in horary, and primarily because in horary, many of the medieval and Renaissance horary practitioners whose teachings are a part of the lineage of teachers that I studied with used quadrant based houses, and a lot of very specific horary ideas and concepts involve the house cusps from quadrant based forms of division. So a lot of people who use horary now, like who have studied traditional horary use quadrant based houses. So I wasn't gonna like just stop. I know I tried doing whole sign for a little bit with horary, and I'm entrained to like a method with quadrant in horary, so I just stuck with it. Yeah. What are some things you tend to see in the chart that may be indications of pregnancy? Yeah. Well, excuse me. Often it will be transits to the fifth house, transits to the moon, or very fertile looking transits in the angular places. So by that I mean like an exalted Jupiter in Cancer coming up, next spring. In any of the angular houses is not it's not uncommon to see when a family is being created, right? Or um Jupiter moving into the fifth house in a water sign. Uh, Transits to Venus in a water sign from Jupiter. Jupiter is one of the traditional planets associated with fertility. But a new moon in your progressed phase, fifth house transits to the fifth house ruler, transits to planets in the fifth house. And then I would say just like very fertile, fertile looking transits in general. You get a feel for fertile looking transits. For example, many women get pregnant under Pluto moon transits. Sometimes Neptune moon transits coincide with pregnancy, not as often with Uranus. Saturn moon periods are actually not uncommon to see pregnancy, especially when it's a real shift in terms of maturity, responsibility, becoming a mother, that kind of thing. So, yeah, those are some of the things that come to mind, but it's a pretty extensive, it's a big topic. And I don't typically just look for pregnancy unless someone's asking. So I would much prefer in my practice someone come in and say, "Hey, I'm hoping to get pregnant. When do you see some potential times where that may happen? We're going to start trying next week or whatever it is." Then I can get really specific, and I'll usually be able to find a transit that matches, and be a little bit more creative as well. All right. Hey, thank you, Flexing Fate, for a super sticker. I don't know what that is, but thank you. That's really nice of you. Okay. Well, let's wow, okay. I know you're not big on asteroids, but would you consider Chiron conjunct the MC something to look at? Yeah, absolutely. Any planet, if you work with asteroids, first of all, it's not that I think asteroids are valid or invalid. It For me, it's sort of like, are you someone who in music, it's like, are you someone who plays uh slide guitar, Like, nah, I don't really use that tool, That's kind of how I see it. It's like a tool that I don't really use because I have a really good, healthy working relationship with a ton of other tools that I'm still trying to develop and deepen. And so introducing new tools for me when I really am focused on getting to know another set is like, it's sort of like, yeah, I'm really working on blues guitar. So I work on the slide guitar all the time, or someone else is working on playing classical or flamenco guitar, they're probably not going to be like, yes, I've been really also trying to learn slide, So all I'm saying is that it's if you are someone who works with asteroids, definitely pay attention to them if they're on an angle, for sure. uh, Nightlight is such an amazing astrology school. I'm in my third year in studying horary. Oh, thank you. this is, and she's mentioning that the staff are also supportive and helpful, and they are. And that is great, Sonia. We really appreciate you. Don't forget, today's the last day to sign up for with the early bird rate. Any questions at all that you have? You're also free to ask me questions that are more philosophical or spiritual, or anything is fine. It doesn't have to be just technical astrology questions. This is I love this question. If I can put it up. Well, that's funny. No. Okay, here we go. I'll do this one first. Agnes says, "Hi Adam, can you share to us what happened to you or anyone close to you during your Saturn opposite natal Mars?" Yeah, let me just double check the timing because I'm almost positive that I know what that was, but it's been a minute, so let me just go back. It was when, because I've got a Mars in Gemini, so it was Saturn in Sag. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, yes. So, okay, so Saturn was in Sagittarius when my oldest daughter was born. So I became a dad, and Saturn was opposing my natal Mars at that time. One of the things that was a part of the first couple of years of her life, especially the first year, while Saturn was opposing my Mars, was she had really intense colic. I swear to God, she screamed about 70% of the time she was awake for the first year of her life. It was brutal, just absolutely brutal. And I dealt with an extreme amount of frustration and agitation. And yet, can you get mad at a little baby? No, you cannot. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't help anything to get mad at an infant. So I was dealing with what felt to me like the most intense amount of anger and frustration and helplessness that I'd ever experienced in my entire life, as Saturn opposed my Mars. And so there was an inability to express frustration, and then a weird way in which it started. Um, oh, it just started seeping out in physical symptoms and manifestations, with health. And even Ashley was exhausted by this even more than I was. She's doing the full-time mom, she's nursing, and the whole thing. But that was a very, so in that process, one of the reasons that I initially got into bhakti yoga and got into a very monastic, disciplined state was really because I was looking for a lifeline, to deal with the intensity of my daughter in the first couple of years of her life. Not surprisingly, as everything sort of settled down, the strictness of that monastic discipline was also not as necessary. So anyway, that's a long story, but I find that anytime you have Saturn opposite your natal Mars, you will often go through periods of time where you have to refine your temper, your relationship with anger. You'll have to work within constraints. You may have to develop some kind of discipline. You have to mature the Mars function, figure out what's healthy frustration and what isn't. Work within frustrating, limiting situations, stuff like that. Yeah, good question. What or who is the most interesting chart you have ever seen? No need to mention names unless it's a celebrity. Well, I can mention, I did readings backstage at the American Music Awards back in, I want to say it was 2015. Was it 2015? I think it was 2015. Anyway, and I got to read for Wyclef, and that was super cool. And I was able to say that publicly because I had pictures taken with him and everything. That was neat. But what was even neater for me was that in this gifting suite backstage where celebrities come before shows, and they're basically just given a lot of free stuff, purses, free getaways to, ski chalets and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, I was sitting and I was doing tarot and astrology readings, and this gentleman sits down on a couch that's literally like right behind my chair. So his back of his head was up to mine. And this woman sits down with me and she works for him, and I won't say anything more than that. But she says, "Yeah, I'm here with Bobby." And I said, like, "Oh, okay." And she said, like, "Bob Weir, do you know who he is?" And I was like, "No," because I wasn't into the Grateful Dead yet. So this Bob Weir was sitting with his head like right up to mine, and he was just munching on a big bag of granola. He was just literally just sitting there eating granola, and he had it in his beard, and it was just. And so I called Ashley when I got a break, and I said, "Hey, I'm in the gifting suite, and Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead is like sitting right next to me." And Ashley just freaked out. She just freaked out. And then I was like, and she was like, "This is wasted on you." But it wasn't, because years later I would become a deadhead. Years later I would become, it was like an omen. Bob Weir sitting next to me transmitted his astrological gifts of music right into my brain. And eventually, some years later, I would become a deadhead. Isn't that a cool story? So I thought you might enjoy that one. I didn't read for him. I read for someone who was like on his staff. But anyway, and that was pretty cool. I have read over the years for, I don't know, maybe 20 to 30 celebrities, some really big and a lot who are just kind of like if you heard their title and where they worked and everything, you'd be like, "Oh, wow." But it's not like it's not like Brad Pitt or something. So, and I also read for more. There's more people in the United States government that are into astrology than I think people realize, for sure. Because when I lived in DC, people like I've worked with people who are elected officials. I'll just say that, and not asking questions that are any different than anyone else. They're not talking about politics with me. They're talking about their love life. So that's one thing that I get to know that a lot of people don't know is that everybody's into astrology. Everyone's got a dirty little secret. And so it's funny because I'm always out in public and I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm going to tell anyone at this get together of parents from the school that I'm an astrologer, because, oh my God, I don't want, like people think it's weird. And on the occasions that I have told, all of a sudden, like 4 other people here and they're like, "What? I'm a Leo," So anyway, wow, we have someone who gave $20. That is incredibly nice. I don't know where to find you. I'm trying to find the little $20 that you gave, because what a nice thing to do. Super sticker. What are these super stickers? I don't know what this is, but great. I mean, it's so nice. This is an interesting question from someone who also contributed a sticker. Hi, Adam. How can you see autism in a natal chart? What planet combinations, aspects, etc., could suggest ASD in the birth chart? Well, I am certainly not an expert on this, and I would actually defer to some of the students from my programs who have taken more time to get to know this subject. Several of them that come to my mind are have children with autism, and so they're more naturally interested in the subject. And or some people are therapists too who have developed this a little bit more. So I will say it's not something I've seen a ton of in my practice. So I'm always careful to be honest about how much I've seen. But honestly, I would look at the first house, at Mercury, and at the moon, because those were the traditional signifiers of health and mental sort of cognitive disposition or health, character, mental, emotional health. You can typically see things like that. And some of the things that I've seen that are not uncommon would be like Mercury, Uranus, for example, where something, doesn't Mercury, Uranus sound like the word neurodivergent? Do you see what I mean? But there are others too, but it just depends. Because I think there's many different ways the planets can speak to someone who has a different way of seeing, a different way of experiencing, a different way of cognizing, right? And so we just have to be really thoughtful about it. I would much rather start with, where do I see this in my child's chart, than I would try to give some objective list of signifiers, because I've seen enough of astrology to know that it's easier to identify things once you have something to identify than it is to create some kind of pseudo objective list of identifiers that will always indicate this or that, right? So if you have a child who is autistic, for example, or you yourself would identify as neurodivergent, and you're interested in seeing where that shows up, I can promise you that 5 different people with that um, question will probably have different ways that the chart shows it. A lot of it probably comes down to those topics, though, like first house ruler, planets in the first, Mercury and the moon. But anyway, that's a great question. uh, okay. It was just Bob Weir's birthday. Okay, wonderful. Leslie says, I'm a first year student and wanted to thank you and your staff for all the dedicated time spent to educate us on this topic. Thanks. Well, thank you, Leslie. That's fantastic. And I just really love what a vibrant community, like people who come to Nightlight, sure, like you're like, oh, I want to learn because I like Adam's approach or whatever. But what you come into in the Nightlight community is really that it's a community. Our students, I can't think of the last cohort that didn't have multiple different meetings with each other outside of class, Discord groups that were chatting, in and outside of class. So yeah, it's a really rich community experience to learn at Nightlight, and that's what I love most about it. Politicians and finance guys have a secret craze with astrology. Yeah, but it's not just guys. I'll tell you that because I honestly I can think of several elected officials who are women who came to me for readings. So I don't think it's just guys. But it's true. Also, I will say, when I was in New York City, I had many clients who were interested in questions about investing. Way more common in New York City when I was doing astrology readings there, for whatever reason, but Wall Street, I guess. Okay. Please stop talking about colic as if it were a medical condition that is located in the baby. I didn't do that at all. That's your own projection there, my friend. That's not at all what I meant. It's just true. If babies have colic, I mean, however you want to phrase it, doesn't matter to me. Is your program accredited? No, astrology programs are generally not accredited, right? Because you're entering into a field that's not generally considered valid by like any kind of accrediting institution. There are some things that come up in well, like for example, larger astrological organizations will sometimes gather together schools that demonstrate that they have a kind of curriculum in place and they show their curriculum and so forth. I think ESAR is doing something like that. So there are different ways that astrological organizations can try to vet and sort of establish a list of reputable programs. And, and then it's also up to each school as to whether or not they actually want to participate in that, because some of the standards that those organizations will set up are arbitrary or are being influenced by certain perspectives on astrology that the institution itself already has. So it gets a little political. All right. Anyway, Achutananda Das says, "Can you tell someone is LGBT by looking at their chart?" Again, there are some signifiers that are more common than others when it comes to different forms of like personal like identity or sexual identity. For example, it's not uncommon to see Venus retrograde in the first house or the seventh house as showing some different orientation that's not heteronormative or whatever. Uranus Venus would be another one. Pluto Venus sometimes. Sometimes Pluto Venus will show up in the chart of someone who will have a significant transition, who'll make a transition. But those are just examples. It's really better always to start with context, right? So I would much rather not look at a chart and try to judge or evaluate what it is in some objective way. I'd much rather start with, well, why are you here? What do you want to talk about? And if the person says, I'm into astrology, I was wondering if you can see where my transition shows up in my birth chart. Okay, now I can work. I have something good to work with. But starting with some kind of pseudo objective approach to astrology is almost always problematic. It's like saying, for example, if you were applying it to the tarot cards, this is where people will instantly be able to make sense of what I'm saying if it doesn't make sense yet. Would you say that there is a card that objectively will always indicate that the person you're talking to in this reading is a lesbian? It's kind of a stupid way of thinking. So, yeah. Anyway, so I like this. Uh, Hi, Adam. How do you balance being an astrologer and just living your life? Sometimes I just feel like I'm obsessed with astrology and I see it everywhere and it's hard to shut off. Well, um, that's a really good question. I listened to this podcast. I just started listening to it. Someone recommended it to Ashley, and then Ashley and we had a little 10th anniversary weekend getaway. We went up north to Grand Marais in Minnesota. Got to see the Northern Lights. That was cool. And she was like, let's listen to this podcast. It's called The Emerald. I think it's called The Emerald. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. It's easily now one of my favorite new podcasts. Anyway, highly recommended if you haven't heard it before. But in this podcast, he was talking about, one of the things I really appreciated about it anyway, was he was talking about this kind of emphasis that we place in the modern spiritual West on open-mindedness and open-heartedness and just opening yourself to the flow of life and opening yourself to more information. And in a sense, this is problematic. It seems like a really good virtue. And certainly, like, I've learned in my life how to be more open-hearted and more open-minded, and that's been a good thing. But, open gates and closed gates was kind of what he was talking about in this podcast, that animate traditions have ways that gates are opened in rituals and gates are closed in rituals. And this is why I was mentioning the bag. If you put your cards in the bag, the gate is closed. When I am done doing astrology, for the most part, I do not think about it. I don't obsess over it. That's also because I do enough of it that I get sick of it. And sometimes you just have to get to that point with astrology where you have a saturation level, and there's nothing wrong with being in a phase where you're obsessed because it's so exciting and new and you're learning and you're taking it all in. I mean, there were years of my life that were like that, and it wasn't necessarily damaging or destructive. But I think in time you do need to develop something like an off switch. Put the cards in the bag, step away. And then bring it back. If it's a daily part of your spiritual practice, listen to your content, look at your transits, do your astrological journaling for the day or whatever else. You have an altar that you say a little prayer to the planets on, check your transits, whatever. You can ritualize that engagement, and then you can just turn it off. On the other hand, if you are someone who is in an active process of learning, it is not uncommon for you to see and learn and think astrologically in the same way that someone learning to speak Spanish will just start seeing and learning and thinking in Spanish. So allow yourself that process and just be discerning. Like, is that what's going on here? Okay, cool. At some point, I'm sure it'll calm down. If it's feeling like obsessive and you can't let go and there's a controlling element, then you got to develop a bag. You got to learn to close your gate, because openness is nothing unless it goes along with a very sensible, spiritually intelligent version of closedness, right? The two go together. Okay. David, I'm neurodivergent and have Sun, Moon, Uranus, T-square, but that's just what pops out to me, not a universal significator. Yeah, that's a great one, David. I love that, because the luminaries in a T-square with Uranus are often suggestive of someone whose life path in general, or maybe something about the way that your, the kind of biomatrix of your spirit and body together are going to express in some Uranian manner. And that would often be to not conform to a standard idea or image of what intelligence is or what the body is or what the mind is or whatever. So that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. This is a great question. Meg says, reading James Hillman's The Soul's Code, how can we use best astrological tools to help us find our acorn? So the acorn theory is the idea that there is something like a, um, a, a an oak tree that is in the process of expressing itself in a lifetime. I believe that ancient astrologers saw that most fundamentally through the sun and its placement, although a close analysis of the sun and the moon together in the chart in its phasal dynamic, along with the ascendant, is a really important kind of, it's like all of those things together are really important for understanding the oak tree that's in the process of the acorn, so to speak. But the sun, most fundamentally, and then secondarily, I would even say the lot of spirit. In ancient astrology, the lot of the spirit is a solar lot. And so understanding the spirit lot in the chart as well as the sun together will often give you a pretty strong indication of that sense of what the soul is yearning to become in this lifetime, in this body. Um, Great question. Yeah. We talk about that a lot in my first year program. That's one of our major techniques that we learn. Yeah. All right. Jessica asks, Adam includes in my natal chart, I have 2 grand trines and a kite. Can you give me a brief overview of the difference? Well, I don't work with kites personally. It's not an aspect configuration that I work with. I would prefer to stick to simpler and more basic things that I feel like are easier and usually more helpful. That's me. That's maybe just my own bias speaking too, you know? So, but what I will say is that grand trines are, to me, anytime you have 3 planets connected by trines, they're all in the same element, there's going to be a strong elemental disposition in that chart. And the element in question, like if it's a grand earth trine or grand water trine or whatever it is, understanding that the life may express strongly through an element can be a really important part of natal delineation. And so I'd pay a lot of attention to that. But I couldn't differentiate it from a kite because I don't really work with kites. What is your human design information? Deanna asks. I am a human being that was designed with some spark of divinity. That's all you get. Okay. Let's see here. How do you get to be accredited? What you teach is PhD quality. Well, that's really nice of you. I don't know about that, but but you know what? I don't care. I don't want to be accredited. I just want to be me. And if people like learning about astrology from me in the school and our community, then great. Otherwise, does not matter to me. It's not something that I seek or want or desire. For thousands of years, astrologers have learned and studied astrology from other practitioners who have learned the art and passed it down through texts and practice. That has always been how it has been taught for the most part. There's been certain eras that have been more hospitable to astrology being part of universities or schools, but it's been a practitioner-based apprenticeship model for thousands of years, and I just don't think it needs to be anything other than that personally. Not that I'm opposed to people bringing it into school settings or whatever, you know, it's just, I just don't want to. I don't see any need for it. It's like, I would much rather stick with the apprenticeship model because I believe that it's a living, vibrant way to learn spiritual things in the same way that, like, you know, learning an instrument, you often study with people who are really good at playing it. That's it. So I think that if you study with some good astrologers, not just one, but like a couple, you'll be good to go. It doesn't need to be accredited. It needs to be accredited for someone else, not really for us, Okay. Let's go. I'm going to see if I can do one or two more and then we'll be done. Everyone and their dog is an astrologer. That's a funny comment. There's more people learning and studying and practicing astrology in the same way I've watched and witnessed this over many decades of being involved in the yoga industry, and have watched, a lot more. There's a lot more yoga teachers too, right? That's a thing. There's a period of time where it looks like everyone's doing it, and then, over time there will be fall off. I can almost guarantee it, that, people who are really deeply dedicated to astrology will last, and they'll learn and they'll grow and they'll evolve. And I really do believe that for a lot of astrologers out there. And a lot of people who are just experimenting with it or exploring it, like a lot of yoga teachers, they'll do it for a little bit and then they'll be like, yeah, this doesn't make as much money, or it's not as fun, or my interest isn't there, or it was a phase or something like that. So we just have to be really accommodating of the fact that, like, as astrology is getting more popular, there's going to be a lot of people playing with, doing it professionally. We don't have to hate on them, but we also don't have to, we should still be very discerning and try to find channels that, really speak to us and help us grow and learn as people and as astrologers. And that's a little bit harder to find. You got to spend a little bit more time to find those kinds of channels. Just my experience. Adam, I have clients asking me to start offering courses and I haven't taught before. Any tips on starting to teach astrology? There is no better way to learn astrology than by teaching. It's amazing. I would say that, like, no one's ever really ready to teach astrology. My only advice is, throw yourself into it. If people are asking you to teach a course, and then just don't get out over your skis. Teach some simple things to start with. Take people through the archetypes of the 12 signs. Take people through the archetypes of the planets. You don't need a comprehensive course to start with, just find some things that you can teach very basically to build your confidence and to get your, kind of get your feet wet and just get some experience in teaching. And then I think, things will grow. But, like, teaching is great. I feel like, make sure that, if the other thing that's really important as you teach is to credit your sources. So, like, as as we grow as astrologers, we should never pretend that, we don't have a lineage behind us, because we do. We're standing on the shoulders of people who have come before us, So it's like, make sure you tell people who you read and who you learned from. Even, it's not like you don't have to be like a graduate school paper where every single line is being cited, or something like that. But, like, gesture toward where and who you've learned from and how you've learned, because that is important. And it's important to be in integrity as teachers. That's the only other tip I'd give, I guess. All right. Haley says, absolutely love the Emerald podcast. Yes. Isn't it? It's just so good. David, the Emerald is awesome. Yeah. Love it. Okay. What are you speaking about at NORWAC next year? I don't know. I submitted a bunch of talks and they haven't told me which ones they have decided to run with yet. So I don't know. I could be talking about Neptune in Aries. I could be talking about the mystical Saturn. I could be talking about the history of the nodes of the moon. I could be talking about Uranus into Gemini. I don't know. I submitted like 6 or 7, I think. Anyway. Oh, is it? I don't know if they've already listed it. JC says that they've listed my 8th house talk on karmic debts. Yeah, I would love that. That talk I did for a recent webinar, and I think I offered to do that one at NORWAC as well. So JC knows more than I do about it. Devora says, took your first year course when my mom was in hospice 3 years ago, got me through a rough transition. Going to Goa, India for a program with Rick Levine. What's your best advice for going to India? Well, I had a lot of fun when I was in India with Rick Levine, who apparently likes India. I don't know, have fun. Rick's a magician. I had a really fun time when I was at a conference speaking in Calcutta with Rick, and we got stuck on a bus one day and had a hoot. I love Rick. I think you'll have fun. Another thing I would say is if you're going, try to get to some pilgrimage places. Try to take time out from learning astrology to visit the deities. Those are powerful. There's so much Shakti there. Just soak it up and take time to pray and take time to offer and like humble yourself in the presence of those deities in those temples. They are just powerful and it's tangible the way that they'll start working in your life if you commune with them. Yeah, I really feel that. Both times I went to India, just such Shakti. Okay. Wow. All right. Wow, there are so many. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. Yeah. So I think that's going to be it. Emily says, I can attest to the community at Nightlight. I have a couple group texts that are ongoing with fellow Nightlighters. Have met several at Norwalk, some of the best Astro friends. Yes, totally. Thank you, Emily. Emily is about to be one of our donation-based clinic readers as well. So Emily is a shining example of one of our alumni who's just done some really great things with her astrological practice. So I'm going to leave it there. I have to get going because my sadhana I have to start my sadhana in like 15 or 20 minutes to make sure that it's set before I teach this afternoon. This is my life. Like, I am Capricorn moon in the 9th house, man. I have a daily routine that I follow like it is my lifeline. It is a very important part of my life. I'm a little bit of a monk in that respect, but I also sincerely believe that it is adherence to practices, even if you don't have it as regularly and methodically and regimented as my crazy, Capricorn moon, having regular practices of communion, prayer, listening, creativity, physical care, whatever it is, astrology, because it's all about rhythms in the sky, really pairs best with rhythmic lifestyle practices. There are so many different lifestyle practices, but if I could tell anyone what I think you need to be the most successful in having astrology, not only as an intellectual thing, but as something that's actually helping you develop spiritually, pair it with rhythmic lifestyle practices of any kind. I think you get a lot more out of it that way. Anyway, whatever, I'll leave it there. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope that this was this was really fun for me, and it's just a joy to be able to visit with all of you in the audience and answer some questions and have some interesting conversations. I will be back on Monday. One thing I'm really excited for is on Monday, one of my former students from about 14 years ago just developed a brand new astrology software program that is cloud-based and will allow you to work with charts across desktop, laptop, phone, all of your devices at the same time. So you don't have to replicate charts from one device to another. There's a lot of other cool features that he built, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe there's a Nightlight alumni who built an astrology software program. So I don't get anything out of that at all, but I'm having him on as a bonus episode on Monday because people often ask me about astrology software programs, and I wanted to promote an alumni. So that'll be kind of a fun bonus episode on Monday. Otherwise, next week, lots of content coming in the approaching Mars-Pluto opposition. We're going to be taking a long look at Mars-Pluto next week. So I think we have 2 or 3 episodes on Mars-Pluto in the middle of next week that'll probably form the core of what we're looking at in daily content. So anyway, I hope you all have a great day today. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, it's the last day of our early bird sale. So take advantage of those early bird rates on the upcoming year 1 program, and check out those webinars that are coming up over the next few months. And I hope to see you again soon. Bye, everyone.